So I want to point you to this, because as I mentioned earlier, one of the problems I think that we have when we start trying to look at the future, bearing in mind that from an education perspective, we're starting 20 years out. You know, if you have a look at my children, we're trying to educate my children to go into careers in 2035, 2040, that they will then be in up until about 2070, 2080, if they don't get automated out, basically shunted out, whatever it happens to be. So you can find this on the 311 Institute website. It's a freebie, it's just on the main site. But the reason why I'm sort of showing this is everything that was on the starburst, so those 180-odd emerging exponential technologies, is in here. And increasingly, countries and governments around the world are actually using it as a bit of a fill-in, frankly, a bit of a technology guide. So the idea is this. You take out your mobile, you download the whatever it is, codex. As you can see, this is just scrolling because I've just literally gone and it's now not stopping. Okay, didn't want it to stop there, but hey-ho, right, so we go up. So the idea is, so what you have, basically what I try to do is I try to simplify the future because there's a huge amount of complexity and we don't need complexity in our lives. So what we have basically is a very quick intro, 15 seconds, basically, where is it? Yeah, the impact, basically, the technology. Is it disruptive? Is it decentralizing an individual thing? Where are we? Where are we from a regulation perspective, velocity, accessibility, and affordability? Because while we talk about all of these individual technologies and how we can combine them to create new products and services, next-generation organizations, next-generation industries, really, most people sort of go, yeah, self-driving car, okay, that's the future. When's it going to arrive? If you want to understand when something's going to arrive, the technology can arrive today. But culturally, we might not embrace it for 10 years. The regulators say, no, you can't get in that self-driving car. If the self-driving car is $1 million, you can't buy it. If it's not available in your country, you can't access it. So there's lots of different things. So the idea is here that you go to the QR code, if it actually works. I don't know if it works on this screen, but anyway. But you go to the QR code, and you'll instantly get taken to all the sort of articles and everything else, and you can mooch about basically the articles, see who's developing what, where we are with the state of it, and all that kind of stuff. So that's just a sort of fun one. And biobatteries, by the way, if you want to build Internet of Things devices that don't have to rely on a traditional energy source, that's what they transform. So as we start moving into the last presentation, I'm going to tell you a story, but I'm also going to show you how we start unlocking human potential. Because one of the things that we all want to do is, whether it's through education or whatever it happens to be, is unlock our own potential and human potential. And we also like clickers that work. So here we go. So when we talk about unlocking human potential, I do quite a lot of work in Africa. I do a lot of work around the rest of the world, but I do a lot of work in Africa. If you sort of go down to South Africa, if you go to Soweto, you see a lot of children that essentially are just living in slums. Thank you very much. When you go and ask those children and say, I want to talk to you about your future. What's your future? Pretty much all of them, including the parents, say, well, from our perspective, our future is that we sleep in a shack, we sit next to a slum, we play in an open sewer, and in a number of years we die. These children and many of the families literally have no future. So here's a little story. There is an American organization called Crystal House. Crystal House is a philanthropic educational institution. Typically, it's run by a billionaire philanthropist who stays quite quiet. But every now and then she pumps in about $50 million. And that $50 million is distributed around the world and everything else. Now, with Crystal House, the only entry requirements that you have for Crystal House is that you, as a child, you have to have nothing. And then, if your parents are drug abusers, poverty-stricken, disabled, whatever it happens to be, well, that just actually means that you get closer and closer to the top of the list. So we are talking about some of the most fundamentally disadvantaged children on earth. Children who genuinely, without any intervention, would have no future and would die in a gutter, unless they were lucky and somehow managed to get out. Crystal House basically takes these children, enters into a family contract, and they say, we will take your child on the condition that as parents, you get involved with your child's education. They put on healthcare services, dental services, transportation services to get the children there, and then they put the children into a relatively standardized industrial learning environment, and they teach them. In the 5 countries that Crystal House operates, these children who have no future are in the top 98th percentile. They're in the top 2% of those countries' results by result. So they are working for organizations like Boeing, like NASA, like IBM, and all these other things. So here's the thing. If we can take children who have no future, put them into the right environment, and we can then get them to a point where they can get gainfully employed by some of the world's most prestigious organizations, the argument that I would put to you is that as individuals, we all have potential within us. We just need the right support mechanisms and the right resources, mentoring, and people around us to help us realize it. So as we start having a little bit of a look into the future, there are a whole variety of new ways, basically, that we can unlock human potential. But think about this, basically, from the point of view, basically, of somebody, basically, in a ghetto or a slum. From an education perspective, increasingly we are trying to educate people for lifelong earning, lifelong learning, we'll come to that, and we want them to be productive members of society. So those are fundamentally what I think a lot of the goals basically of today's education systems, and we are all responsible for education today. When we look at the future of work, increasingly we talk about purpose-driven employment. We talk about changing place. Places are changing. You know, if you step back 100 years ago, you went to a factory, you went into an office. Now, basically, I can strap on a virtual reality headset and I can go and wander around NVIDIA's headquarters. And I can work from home, I can work from the beach and everything else. When we have a look at people, the people arguably aren't changing. The skills that we need to have and our capabilities need to change, but that's just part of life. Life evolves. And then from a technology perspective, well, as we've sort of seen, technology is advancing at quite a pace. So all of these things are changing. As I mentioned earlier, technology helps democratize, demonetize, decentralize, and digitize basically a whole variety of different things, and I gave you the healthcare examples earlier. But now consider this. So on the one hand, we have the 12,000 low Earth orbit satellites that connect the other 3.5 billion people on the planet. Once you are connected, you can talk to each other, you can access resources basically that you've never been able to access before. So just by the fact that you can give a child basically a laptop and an internet connection, they can instantly start accessing something like YouTube or whatever else they want to go off and start their learning adventure. Increasingly, we are democratizing access to computing. So if I give a child a laptop, one of the biggest problems that they may have basically is they just turn around and say, don't know how to use it. I don't know how to use Windows. I don't know how to use Google. I don't know how to use any of these things. As we start driving towards behavioral interfaces, so think of your Alexa or Google Home product or your Siri product, increasingly, we are using natural language, thanks to artificial intelligence, to talk to our devices. And we're not just talking to devices, we're talking to technology. You're going to be talking to a self-driving car. You think you're getting into a self-driving car with a keyboard? Increasingly, we are talking to computers and devices and the technology that is on us, near us, around us, whatever it happens to be. So we are suddenly simplifying people's access to technology, because whether you're my grandmother who doesn't know what a mouse is, you just talk to the tech. And as the artificial intelligence systems behind these platforms get better, as we start moving towards conversational AI, where you can have a conversation with them, not just ask them pointed questions, they reply, you ask another pointed question, they reply, this opens up a whole new world of opportunity for you. Google, back in the sort of early 2000s, democratized information, or democratized access to information. If I asked you, for example, what the melting point was for hydrogen, none of you would know. But you could Google it, and within 3 seconds, you'd tell me. So Google democratized access to information. When you have a look at these, basically someone quite a little while ago said, how would you explain life in the 20th century to somebody from the 19th century? And they said, well, I would say to them that in my hand, I hold access to all of the world's information. That's science fiction by itself, but you do. You have access to a whole world of information, whether you're in formal education or not. However, consider this. As we start embedding artificial intelligence and a whole variety of other things into the internet, different products and services, we are now starting to get to the point where we democratize access to expertise. An example of this is robo-lawyers. If you wanted someone to parse a contract for you in the past, you'd go to an actual law firm, they'd sit down, review the contract, tick some boxes, give it back to you, give you a bill. We are increasingly accessing expertise via these systems. So we're moving from what is to how do I do X? And then something gets thrown up, whatever it happens to be. Digital assistants. Now, on the one hand, as we race into the future, these digital assistants, whether you call them bots, avatars, AIs, whatever they happen to be, on the one hand, they're going to be competing with us. They are going to take jobs. I'm already seeing jobs in the insurance sector, the asset management and banking sectors basically go, and they're being taken by artificial intelligence. However, these are also your new co-workers. And the interesting thing about artificial intelligence is you as humans learn in one way. These learn in a completely different way. So they identify new patterns of knowledge, basically they identify new data, new knowledge, and everything else. So one of the interesting things I've sort of seen in the past is if you go to people who've been beaten by artificial intelligence, so think Garry Kasparov, basically with in the chess world, if you think the AlphaGo champions, and you say, you must really have hated being beaten by an AI, because that must suck, surely. You know, you're stupider than a machine. The surprising answer that they give you basically is no, actually, it actually made me a better competitor. And the reason being, if you take, for example, the AlphaGo platform, you will play a game in one way, the AI will learn how to play the game basically in another way, and it will develop an entirely different strategy. So when you start tag teaming human ingenuity and human knowledge, human expertise, basically with artificial intelligences that have their own version of that, you don't become less human. You become more insightful and cleverer. You become more capable. You become more than you were. So the unison of artificial intelligence, basically with human ingenuity, creativity, knowledge, and all that sort of stuff, actually means that we have even more potential to do more things as humans, whatever those things are, whether it's designing something, filling in a report, whatever it happens to be. Democratizing creativity. So, for example, we have given a child in Soweto a laptop and a basic Wi-Fi connection. Laptop or whatever the device is has a behavioral interface. As we start seeing the emergence of creative machines, provided these get embedded into some of the major platforms, why can't I then start saying, Google, whatever, Google, design me a T-shirt, design me a product, design me something like this, whatever it happens to be. How do I build a business? design the product, scale the business, whatever it happens to be. So we're democratizing creativity, but we're democratizing creativity not just in terms of creation, in terms of art and music. Google, go off and create me a piece of music that suits my mood, whatever it happens to be. Democratizing access to creativity gives us a whole new kit bag. If you can't draw today, a good example of this is go to NVIDIA. NVIDIA have got a platform called Gauguin. If you're a crappy artist, draw something that looks a bit like a mountain, it will fill it in high definition. So just because you can't draw, just because you can't program, again, so when we have a look at programming, we're starting to see the automation of programming. Yeah, Google, whatever it happens to be, again, build me a program. So we're starting to unlock more and more potential, more and more things, and we're starting to democratize more and more things. As I say, inevitably, basically, there are going to be jobs that are lost. And about a year ago, basically, I produced a codex on the future of training and education, which actually ended up being picked up by four countries' governments in the space of about 4 hours, which was quite phenomenal. And one of the main sort of issues that I identified was, if your career dead ends, you can't go back to university basically for 3 years to go off and try to be educated in a new thing. So you're in this industry, your career in this industry is dead ending. There's a new opportunity in this industry over here. How do you, on the one hand, get trained in this new thing over here at speed? And how do you move from this industry to that industry? Moving from this industry to that industry is actually a cultural problem. It's not a technology problem. So on the one hand, from an education perspective, I increasingly think that we need general specialists, because increasingly, if you have a look at children, they are general specialists. They suck up huge amounts of information, just about everything. And then as we push them through the formal education system, we get to the point where they get to the age of 18, and we say, what do you want to be when you grow up? Whatever that answer is, you go to university, you come out the other end, you get a career in that particular job. We hope it doesn't dead end, basically, in the next 50 years, basically, that you're in it. If you're a salesman today, you retire a salesman. If you're an accountant today, you retire an accountant, and so on and so forth. So we need to be more general specialists, where, yes, we go into an individual career, but we still have a broad base of skills that allow us to flip between different industries, different careers, and whatever it happens to be. Soft skills, as I kind of mentioned earlier, you need to be adaptable, collaborative, confident, entrepreneurial, empathetic, ethics, collaboration, again, with humans and machines, morality, resourcefulness, exponential thinking. As everything accelerates, basically the word impossible is just 2 letters too long. I've already shown you all of the different science fiction things, basically, that we think of as science fiction that are now essentially science fact, albeit at a very, very basic level earlier. However, basically from a school perspective, why not build your own X labs? I mean, how many universities actually have an X lab where people can come to experience new things in new ways, have conversations with different types of people, different types of thinking, right or wrong or whatever it happens to be. So X labs, build conversations, set grand challenges, create innovative spaces, leadership, mentors, problem solving, research hubs. So research hubs, if you want to go and get a point of view on something, what does the future of X, Y, and Z look like? Where do you go? Risk culture, you've got to take risks. Partnerships, you can't do it alone. As I started down my own sort of education journey, if you want to really transform education and try to make it future fit, you cannot do it alone. It's 100 different things all put together. It's not one person's job, it's all of our jobs. Storytelling, technology, exposure, and time. So these X Labs are now sort of up and running in a couple of countries, and so far they've been very successful. At least keep people sort of getting used to the process, getting through things, coming up with new innovations and thinking about the world in new ways. However, sort of again, one of the other issues that we have when we look at the future is people will say, jobs will dead end. And then inevitably you get the analysts going, yes, but when jobs have dead ended, i.e. the Industrial Revolution, what jobs technology has killed, technology has always created more jobs. And then you go to government, you go to the experts and say, okay, that's fine. So loads of jobs will dead end, okay, and we think we know what those are because we've got a nice list. So what are the new jobs that are going to be created? This is where a lot of sort of independent organizations go, well, we're not quite sure because they haven't been created yet. And you go, yeah, but you're telling me that lots of jobs are going to be created, so you've got to have an idea. Well, we don't really have any ideas at all. Okay, so I'm putting my children through an education system. You're telling me that lots of careers are dead-ending, but you don't know what the future jobs look like. No. Fantastic. So how do I prepare my kids, basically, for that random future? Well, okay. So I thought long and hard about this for actually a couple of hours, which you can predict the jobs of the future. You've got to get slightly closer, admittedly. But consider this. What we have today is basically we have this thing called the internet. On the internet, basically, we have a variety of different learning platforms. Udemy. You've got Lynda, basically, from LinkedIn. You've got edX. You've got Udacity. Those are learning platforms, and increasingly, corporations go to those learning platforms and say, we've got a need for this type of training. Can you create it, and then we will buy it off your platform? So think, say, for example, data science. So a company goes to Udacity and says, we would like a data scientist course. The more organizations that come to these platforms and start saying, by the way, we have a need for this new type of job, you can track that. Because down here, if this is a graph, down here, you can sort of go, well, in the year 2025, we've noticed a number of new career categories that weren't there before, but they're not in particularly great demand. You can then do trending. In 2026, if the number of people who are interested in these new categories starts increasing, say like cybersecurity, whatever it happens to be, starts increasing, and then in the third year it increases, then the fourth year it increases, that's a trend. You can pick that up. If you pick it up early enough, and that's just an algorithmic issue, if you can pick it up, that's just an algorithmic issue. At some point, you can say, we've identified that coming onto these platforms, there's a new type of job. We're not sure what it is, but we've investigated it, and we think that there's some promise here. The trend keeps ticking up. Is this one of these future careers that everybody keeps talking about? You pick it up down here, you've got 5 to 6 years to start training people before it becomes a major thing. So we can track the future of jobs, but we have to be just more intelligent about it. It's the essential kind of crowdsourcing it. If you ask enough people, eventually you're going to hear correlations where people say, I've heard about this new career, and you just keep hearing it and going, what is that? Is that now a thing? Crowdsourcing on the internet. Future skills portals. Singapore have got a platform that's called the Future Skills Portal. If you're a student, or even if you're an existing employee, and you want to know what future jobs are in the industrial sector, you can go onto the Future Skills Council's portal, and you select your industry, you select your specialism, so whether it's operations, front of house, engineering, whatever it happens to be, and they will literally give you a list of skills and future jobs that they think are coming along. We don't have anything like that in the UK, as far as I'm aware. Once you understand what that is, you can then track the competencies that you might need for that individual career or thing, and there's always going to be a degree of accuracy. Some of it's going to be right, some of it's going to be wrong. But you can understand the type of competencies that you need, and then you can educate yourself on those competencies. It's like with data scientists, for example. You need to be able to understand artificial intelligence, mathematics. You also need to have empathetic skills. You need to be able to work with a team, and so on and so forth. We can model that. In addition to that, basically, the myth of the 10,000-hour rule, a little while ago, basically, someone produced a book, and they said if you want to become an expert in an individual field, you've got to spend 10,000 hours on it. The press basically then took that as in order to learn any new skill, you need to spend 10,000 hours on it. And that was a kind of misnomer at the time. We've been able to demonstrate that you can teach somebody the foundations, not expert level, but the foundations, kind of a level 101 level of a new job within about 20 hours. So, for example, if you wanted to learn about accountancy, I could teach you about the fundamentals of accountancy within 20 hours. You won't be an expert by the end of it, but you'll have a good understanding and a good grasp of the fundamentals. So now, basically, we are starting to educate people at speed, because one of the problems is if we aren't able to identify new jobs that are coming up quickly, then we need to, when people get made redundant, you need to be able to flip them from this career in this industry to this career in this industry quickly. So you've got to be able to train them fast. There's ways to do that. However, as I mentioned, moving from this career to this career, we now have a societal challenge as well. So we now need to change basically the contracts that we have with governments, corporations, and everything else. So, for example, I'm an accountant. I am 45, whatever I am. I've been made redundant because an artificial intelligence took my job. I've seen that in 2019, data science is a really great area to be in. I've done my 20 hours worth of training. I've gone kind of the extra mile. Now I go to a technology company, for example, and I say, I am now a data scientist. I've got very basic training. I've seen you've got a job opening. I would like to actually fill that job. At which point, this company goes, you're 45. We're going to try and take a 20-year-old. Let's face it, that's real. Secondly, we're looking for data scientists. You were an accountant. You're in a different profession. Don't think you really understand the data science way. So what we have is we've actually got a cultural mobility problem, switching from one career to another. If you don't believe me, if you're a salesman, for example, today, go and try and get a job in finance. There you go. I'd actually kind of put money on that you'd struggle. So on the one hand, basically what we need is we need to break down some of the societal barriers that we have between moving between different careers but also different industries. Governments basically can help there. So around the world, increasingly we have governments, we have a number of forward-thinking governments relatively, that say to organizations, look, if you take somebody who used to be in that career but they've been made redundant and they're now a data scientist level 101, we'll give you a tax break. So countries are now starting to incentivize corporations to take people on. Then once this person is in a new corporation, data scientists will eventually be automated. You need internal mobility. So today they're a data scientist. In 2 years' time, they move into a different role and career and everything else. So it's not that we don't, I think, have a lot of the answers on how we navigate this complex future. It's not one thing, it's 100 things that we need to stick together. That's very, very difficult. When we start facing the future, there's lots and lots of opportunity for us to do things slightly differently or completely differently. You pick your benchmark. But at the end of it, when we start unlocking this amount of human potential, if you imagine out of that 3.5 billion people that we connect using these satellites, if one person in there has got the imagination, skill, and expertise to create a new energy source or a new whatever it happens to be, that changes the world. All you need is one person to change the world. So if this is everything that we have done so far, when you have a look at all of the innovations that I've talked about, all the technologies that I've talked about, how we're transforming industries, culture, and society from every level, if this is what we've achieved so far, then imagine basically what we can achieve in the future. The future is an opportunity. It is not a threat. But we need a new guide basically on how to try to figure out how we navigate it. And that's it. And so now you'll be very, very glad to hear it's coffee time. So thank you for staying throughout the entire day. And I hope you found it interesting, and I hope you reflect on it. If you want to sort of get involved basically with anything that anyone is doing here, just reach out. This isn't something that any one of us is here to do. It's something that we can all work together with. So go and enjoy your coffee. Take care.